Before we get into any preliminary matters,
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Michael Wilson. Alongside my we represent the government. We are joined at the council at a table with Canadian Morgan.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Would you like to defend the
yes, like good morning, Your Honor. My name is Michael Chandler, and I, along with my colleague Yarden,
Good morning, Your Honor.
represent the Lake Crossing in today's case.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we first like to go through 6 of the restrictions for our swearing in all of the.
Yeah, we'll do that.
And Your Honor, we'd also like to inquire about permission for the bench, both the council and the witness.
Please use it well as you see fit. If you're approaching posting out from this, just enter permission to return with this.
Yes, Your Honor. And one final, we'd like to just double check if you have a line where you're not using all cases here, exhibits, statements, and retrial.
Look at that right here.
Then Your Honor, the government is ready.
Anything with us?
No, Your Honor, the defense is ready for trial.
Okay, great. Here we cover the statement whenever ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, Mr. Chandler, members of the jury, she saw a threat and she took it out. Members of the jury, on July 4th, 2022, lives changed. That's because you'll learn in this city, it's a rally. You'll hear about presidential candidate Thomas Capello and how he was giving a speech a couple blocks away. You'll learn that any politician, Mr. Capello had some controversial views. He had opinions that people didn't like. He had his enemies. And you're going to learn that one of his enemies was in Philadelphia that day. That was the defendant in this case, Miss Blake Crosby. You're going to learn that Miss Crosby viewed Mr. Capello as a threat, and that she didn't think anyone was safe until he was taken out. But what made the defendant special was that she was a trained armed sniper. So with both the motive and the means, the defendant used Philadelphia as her opportunity. You're going to hear that as Mr. Capello stood on that stage trying to inspire a nation, he shot. You're going to learn that on the top of a nearby hotel, a bullet was recovered that matched the type that struck Mr. Capello, right next to a cigarette with the defendant's DNA and fingerprints. And you're going to learn that parts of a sniper capable of firing that bullet were found at a restaurant this defendant visited just hours after the shooting. Members of the jury, it's because of her actions, it's because of the violence that she inflicted on this city, we are here today. Because we're charging the defendant with murder. In doing so, in reverse, the government has to prove to you the elements of murder. That the defendant killed Mr. Capello and that she did so intentionally. And we have to prove to you these elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Members of the jury, that's the highest burden in our legal system. It means at the end of this trial, when you go back through those doors to deliberate, the only reasonable explanation you can have is the one we give. Members of the jury, That's not a burden that we in government should bear. Because of three key points that prove our case. The threats, the location, the skills. Members of the jury, starting with the threats. You're going to hear throughout today's trial about threats that this defendant made on Thomas Capello's. A series of social media posts will show you that she viewed Mr. Capello as a threat and that she did not think anyone was safe while he was alive. You're next going to learn about the location from Secret Service agent Morgan DeVito. When this agent takes the stand, she'll tell you about the investigation she conducted. She'll tell you about that bullet on the top of a nearby hotel and the corresponding cigarette with the defendant's DNA. And she'll tell you about how hotel employees saw the defendant trying to get up to the top of that hotel room just in an hour before the shooting. Finally, you'll hear about the skills necessary to fire that type of bullet when the defendant takes the stand. We have it on a good faith basis to believe that Miss Crosby will testify. And when she does, she's going to tell you about the skills necessary to fire that type of gun. How she was an expert marksman from distances twice that of the bullet that was fired at her. And how not any ordinary person could make that shot. Members of the jury, July 4th was tragic. Mr. Capello should have been able to go. He should have been able to lead a nation, but instead he left. But today, you have the chance to enact justice. And that's why, at the end of this trial, I'm going to come and ask that you find this defendant guilty. Yes.
Mr. Wilson. Members of the jury. They ignored the force and focused on the truth. You see, there's a lot of things that Mr. Wilson and I actually agree. We agree that Senator Capello was killed with a sniper. We agree that the sniper came from the Sinesto Hotel. And we even agree that Miss Crosby had access to the roof of that hotel. Where we disagree. What the government is missing is the evidence. You're going to hear today that they don't have any actual evidence linking Miss Crosby to the murder. They don't have any fingerprints on her rifle. They don't have any gunshot residue on her clothes. You're going to learn they didn't even find the murder weapon for this crime. You're going to learn that they don't have any GPS, eyewitness, or video data showing that Miss Crosby was on that roof when that shot was. In fact, we're going to bring in eyewitness testimony that shows she was at the roof when that shot was. Members of the jury are missing. That's a big problem for the government today. Because when they came into this court, they didn't get to just suggest that Miss Crosby committed this crime. No, they had to prove that she assassinated a U.S. senator. That's a serious accusation, and the law says that when you're threatening to take away someone's freedom, well, you can't prove your case until it's probable or possible. You have to prove it until it's beyond all reasonable doubt. Like Mr. Wilson said, that's the highest burden of the legal system. And today, that burden rests on this table and this table alone. not gonna be able to meet their burden. And to show you why they won't be able to, we have to show you how they ignore the force and focus on the truth. Now you might be asking yourself, what force? Well, we're going to show you today that there was a force of individuals, suspects, that had the motive and the access necessary to commit that crime. Mr. Wilson said earlier that he was going to talk about those threats. You're going to learn that there was countless threats being made about Mr. Capello's life. You're going to learn from his own witness that as she reviewed the threats against Senator Capello, she lost count of the amount of death threats there. He said he's going to talk about that location. And members of the jury, we're going to talk about it. Because we're going to show that the stairwell in that Sonesto hotel, on every single floor, there's access to a room. You're going to learn that from the lobby, there's access to a room. You're going to learn that you don't need a key card, you don't need a key, you don't even have to be a guest. Members of the jury, you're going to learn that you could walk out those doors, go a mile in that direction, and you get to the room. That's a hotel. So we know that there's a forest of people who are making those threats and so worried about. A forest of people that have access to that location. Was there a forest of people that had the skills? I gotta learn more. Like he said, Senator Capello had controversial stances. You're going to learn that one of those controversial stances was on the military. You're going to learn that many of the military who went to his rallies were protesting. They were upset. They themselves were making death threats on the dark web, the internet, in person. And you're going to learn that it's a person that had the skills to commit this crime. So there was a forest of people that had the skills, that were making threats and had access to the location. Well, and why did they look at Ms. Crosby? You're going to learn that it's because she likes to smoke. You're going to learn that one day before the murder, she went up to them and she had to stop. And she accidentally left her cigarette there. So when the real murderer got on that roof and fired their rifle, then there was a cigarette with her DNA covered in gunshot record. Members of the jury, you're going to think that the only suspect, the only tree the government focused on was one with an alibi and no contact with the murder. It was their job to look at the evidence. It was their job to look at all the threats, everyone who had access to the location, everyone with the skills. You're going to learn they didn't do it. I'm asking you not to make sense. When you look at the courts, it'll lead you to the only verdict the system can have. Verdict guilty, or not guilty. Thank you.
We actually look at the offer two things in evidence, both of which have all of their objections with. That makes it 16 and 17, which we get out of the way of the situation.
I don't think so, Your Honor.
Well, let's have a little talk. And you want to consider it have a copy of the policies. That's at this time, Your Honor, the government would like to call special agent Morgan to be safe. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury and spell your last name?
Hello, my name is Agent Morgan DeVito. That's DEVITO. I've seen them.
Could you tell us what you do for a living, Mr. Domingo?
Sure. I'm a special agent for the Secret Service. I'm actually in charge of protecting political candidates.
Well, have you ever protected a political candidate, Thomas Capello?
Yes. That's actually what I was doing on July 14th, 2018.
Was Thomas Capello in Philadelphia?
Yes.
And can you tell us what was Thomas Capello doing?
So Thomas Capello was a senator, and he was actually a presidential candidate. Mr. Capello held some controversial opinions about military, healthcare, but he was still polling at about 30% of his time.
What was Mr. Capello doing in Philadelphia on July?
So on July 4th, Mr. Capello was holding a rally for.
Did anything happen with that?
Unfortunately, a 2-minute speech he was giving, Mr. Capello was assassinated.
Before we get into the events after his assassination, I'd just like to go through the fall. Where to go to school?
So I graduated from the University of Chicago with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. After I graduated, I signed up for the Secret Service training courses. And after that, I started working for the Secret Service, which I've been doing for about 21 years.
What sort of training as a Secret Service agent?
So a lot of people think that protecting or being a Secret Service agent is just protecting political candidates, but that's not the case. We also have to be trained on how to investigate. So part of my training was learning about how to conduct interrogations, to interpret forensic evidence, and to secure crime scenes, and much more.
Were you ever trained on how to handle a homicide?
I was.
I'd like to get into the events after this job. What happened?
After Mr. Capello was shot, I started surveying the scene to see if I saw guns, suspicious. After we didn't find anything, we started to expand our search to the greater Philadelphia area.
Did you find any breakthroughs when you expanded your search out?
Yes, so later that night, we actually received a tip from a hotel employee at the Sonesta. So the hotel employee noted seeing a person wearing all black with a black drawstring bag trying to access the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel shortly before Mr. Capello was hit.
And just to clarify, what was the needs that were done for?
The name of the hotel employee was Margaret.
Now, you mentioned that the hotel employee saw him. Happened when you got it.
So when we got to the room, we decided to do a search. And that search, after that search, we were able to find 2 things: a bullet and a cigarette.
Let's start with that. Would you recognize it if I were to show it to you? Your Honor, I'm approaching defense counsel with advice. Agent Vigo, what if I just keep?
So this was the bullet that we found on the top of the rooftop.
And does it appear to be that accurate bullet?
It does.
Has it been changed or alternated? No. Your Honor, the government now offers Exhibit 5.
No objection, Your Honor.
What was important about that?
So we sent this bullet to our forensics team, and our forensics team was able to find that a bullet identical to this one was used to kill Mr. Capello.
Now, did you find anything next to that bullet?
I did. I found a cigarette.
Did you recognize that cigarette?
I would.
Your Honor, I'll approach you. Your Honor, I'll approach you. What do I just do?
So this is that cigarette butt that we found next to the bullet on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel.
Has it been changed or altered in any ways that you saw? Your Honor, the government now offers Exhibit 7.
Any objection to 7? No objection.
Okay. What was important about that cigarette?
So when we sent this to forensic for testing, we found some DNA.
Whose DNA did you find on that cigarette?
We found the defendant's DNA. On the cigarette. Fingerprints and DNA.
Well, did you find any other DNA on that roof?
No.
Did you find any other fingerprints on that roof?
No, the only DNA fingerprint evidence we found on that was from the defendant.
Now, did you ever find any evidence of a gun that could have shot at that man?
We did. We received another tip that took us to Lever's restaurant because they found the tip exposed that we found a disassembled piece of a sniper.
Did you recognize that disassembled sniper rifle?
I would.
Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness counsel. Approaching the witness. What have I just seen?
So this is a disassembled piece of a sniper rifle, the trigger guard that we found in the trash can of the Lever's after the receiving the tip.
And this appears to be a fair and accurate copy.
It does.
Has been changed or altered in any way. The government offers exhibit 11.
Any documents in the lab?
No, no.
Technical was received.
What was important about this trigger?
So we found that this trigger guard was a disassembled piece of a sniper. The same kind of sniper rifle that this bullet would be made to use.
Now, you mentioned Mrs. Crosby. Did you ever investigate Mrs. Crosby further?
We did. We found that Miss Crosby was actually in the military. That she had served for 8 years. That she was a sniper. In fact, one of the best snipers in the military.
Did she use any of the evidence that you had recovered from your investigation?
Well, since she was a sniper, she did use sniper rifles throughout her entire 8-year career.
And did she use that type of ammunition?
She did.
Well, did you find anything concerning about Mr. Capello's success?
Yes. So we also found some concerning threats that Ms. Capello made threats that she made on Mr. Capello's life.
Would you recognize those threats?
I would.
Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness. And 13. I'm approaching the witness in a second. What have I just seen?
So these are those threats that we found that Ms. Crosby had tweeted.
Do they appear to be carried at the top?
Yes.
Your Honor, the government offers exhibit 12 and 13.
Any objection, 12 or 13?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we object to hearsay. May I? Your Honor, I'm not objecting to the specific statements from Ms. Crosby. We understand those as admissions of a party. We're objecting to the information provided by the company that this was tweeted on. We need further foundation that these are reliable dates that are accurate before the jury sees.
Your Honor, we're actually going into the dates that these tweets were sent out. Only the statements themselves from the defendant. That's of course under the postal bar.
Question.
Your Honor, the dates are months when 2 months before the date of the attack. These dates are absolutely being used for the value. They can't jump the jury as they that.
Bring about the redaction of the dates if you're not going to use them for any kind of thing.
Yes.
We offer a limiting function to not look at the dates of these 2%, only the comments that tweets with that will accept the individual.
Yes.
What was important about these?
So they showed a concerning path. So first, of course, Ms. Crosby made a threat on Mr. Capello's life. She says, as long as he is alive, none of us are safe. She then says, this is the time for patriots. And then next week she said, it's patriots.
Thank you for your time. Your Honor, I know that.
Cross-examination.
Yes. Especially, I want to start exactly where you were talking about threats. And you know that, well, this Crosby isn't the only one that made threats, isn't that right?
Certainly not. As a political candidate, Mr. Capello received dozens of, or thousands of threats.
That's right, you reviewed the dark web, isn't it?
That's right.
You mail,
Right,
social media.
Right.
You didn't find just one threat, did you?
no, we didn't.
Found more than you could count, isn't that right?
Right, but made these threats different with all of the other evidence that connected the defendant.
Well, but isn't it true that the threats you saw from other sources, well, some of them were worse than the threats that Ms. Crosby made, isn't that right? Sure. And now, you said that there was evidence connecting Ms. Crosby on top. Because we can agree that you believe that this crime was conducted with a sniper. Isn't that right?
That's right.
But ma'am, when Ms. Crosby was arrested, you didn't find a sniper rifle that did you?
No, we believe that Ms. Crosby actually didn't enter that sniper rifle, which is what we found in the Cleaver's restaurant where she admits to eating after assassinating, or excuse me, after the assassination of Mr.
Well, special agent, that's arrested, isn't that right?
That's right.
She wasn't the only one person that went to that restaurant, isn't that right?
No, she's not.
You don't know all the people that went to that restaurant, do you?
We don't know all of the people that went to that restaurant, but we know that she was the one who had experience working with victims.
Well, ma'am, let's talk a little bit more about whether or not you can link that. Because we can agree, you reviewed her hotel room, isn't that right?
That's right.
You didn't find any gunshot residue in her hotel.
No.
You didn't find any gunshot residue in the clothes, right?
No, the only gunshot residue that we found was on the cigarette butt that she smoked on the hotel residence.
So the only place where you saw her DNA and gunshot residue was on that.
Right, on that cigarette butt that she smoked.
You didn't find it on the boat.
No.
You didn't find it on that part you talked about. The gun part you talked about.
No.
So let's talk about that. You can, that you reviewed the report of Harper Evans, isn't that right?
That's right.
And Harper Evans, like you said, she worked at the Sinesta Hotel where you believe the attack occurred, right?
Right, she identified the defendant as going up the stairs of the rooftop, and that's where we believe the defendant carried out the assassination.
In this affidavit, she talks about how you get access to the roof, isn't that right?
That's right.
She talks about the stairwell, right?
Yes.
She said the stairwell connects every floor to the roof, right?
Right, and she said that on each door of the roof, it said that no guests.
Okay. But the doors, you didn't need a key to get past them, did you?
No.
You didn't need a key card to get past them, did you?
No.
You didn't need to be a guest at the hotel, did you?
No, you didn't.
To the best of your knowledge, the only thing stopping you from getting to the roof was the sign.
Yes, and we found the only person that ignored that time was the defendant.
Man, isn't it true that you found 3 other cigarettes on that roof? Isn't that
Right.
You had 3 other cigarettes that came from before July 3rd, isn't that right?
Well, 3 other cigarettes that matched the same kind of cigarette that the defendant smoked.
But man, let's be clear. Because those cigarettes were soaked in water, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And the last time it rained was July 2nd, isn't that right?
Right, so they would have had to been placed there July 3rd.
And it's your testimony that water gets soaked by rain after the rain.
No, it's the rabbits.
So it would have to be before July 2nd, but they got it.
That's
And you know that Ms. Crosby didn't get into town until July 3rd, isn't that right?
no, but we did again find a cigarette butt with her DNA.
Let's talk about how that. Your Honor, permission for me to allow Ms. Moon to join me in one. And then, do you have that cigarette butt up there? Permission to approach the tree, Charles. Now, for a moment, then, I want to pretend that we're on the roof of the semester. Yeah, can you do that for me? So let's say I'm on the roof of the semester. I smoke a cigarette. And I drop it. And I walk with it. Well, then there would be a cigarette that had my DNA on that roof, right?
Yes, sir, that's how DNA.
Now let's say someone else walked within 5 feet of that cigarette. fire the gun. Well, then you would expect to see gunshot residue on that scene.
Hypothetically, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Retaves. And now, even though I didn't shoot a gun, this cigarette would be on the book with my DNA and gunshot residue. Isn't that right?
Sure, but so the problem with this whole thing is that it's hypothetical. We know that the defendant was the only person who had, or excuse me, the only person that had experience in military shooting sniper rifles. The only person that was making threats to Barry, or excuse me, one of the few people making threats to Barry Fellow, and one of the few people with the experience and knowledge to be able to shoot the type of rifle that was used to kill.
One of the few people that were more threats than you can count, isn't that right?
More threats, yes, but not more people who could shoot a sniper rifle.
Well, let's talk about the people that were upset at Senator. Your Honor, at this time, you'd like to enter another exhibit, like the ones in exhibit 18, and also all instability checks that.
Is that your understanding at all?
Yes, it is. What do you think? Okay, so, you like copy? Yes, ma'am. That is a affidavit from someone named Mr. Judd, isn't that right?
That's right.
Mr. Judd, he doesn't like, he says in that affidavit that he doesn't like Senator Bell, isn't that right?
That's right.
And he explains that some of the reasons he doesn't like was that he had issues, he had horrible taste on the military, isn't that right?
That's right.
He explained that there were protesters, that he was part of protesters following Mr. Capello around, isn't that right?
Right, and to be clear, Mr. Judd, we investigated him, there was no evidence that he had been part of the military or a sniper. Like,
no investigation from Mr. Judd. But in here, Mr. Judd said, I frequently heard other protesters saying Capello should be killed. He was a threat to every American, etc. Remember that?
yes, like I said, a lot of threats, but not a lot of people with experience.
So, ma'am, you don't know everything that went into the protest, do you?
No, we don't know that.
You don't know everyone that went to the protest on his calendar, isn't that right? So it's possible that someone else who was angry about his opinion on military was in one of those crowds, isn't that right? It's possible that someone with the train was in one of those crowds, isn't that right?
Well, we know that the defendant has been to prior protests. Yes,
It's possible that someone other than the defendant with that train was in there. Is that true?
possible.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions at this time.
Any redirect, please?
I forbid it, yes, I just like to be part of this conversation.
That is.
Yes.
Agent DeVito, was the defendant the only person you investigated in July?
Yeah.
How many people did you investigate?
Everyone was a suspect until we deemed that they were not.
Could you try and count for us how many people you actually did investigation?
I wouldn't be able to count the prayers.
Thank you for your time. Your Honor, I know. And barring any recross, I just asked that Agent DeVito please.
Any recalls?
No recross, Your Honor. I actually published to the 18th.
And Your Honor, I asked to publish all the evidence. For the record, and charge.
Mr. Wilson, can you pass my 18th to the prayers off? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Any further witnesses for the conference?
Your Honor, the government has no witnesses and you asked her.
Very well. That's when you're ready, please call your turn.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls blatant crossing. Yes.
Bench.
Good morning, ma'am. Could you please introduce yourself, the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Blake Crosby.
What do you do for a living, ma'am?
Right now, I'm driving for Uber. I was in the military for about 8 years, but turns out adjusting to civilian life isn't as easy as I expected. So I've been in between jobs.
And there have been a lot of accusations being against you today. I wanted you to take a chance. Did you kill Senator Veglahn?
No. I did.
Did you shoot a rifle on July?
No.
And when was the last time you touched it?
6 years ago. And I was discharged from the military.
We heard today that the shot that hit Mr. Capello was from a hotel to the square where he was giving this. Are you aware of the square he was giving this?
Yes. That's where I was on July 4th.
Are you aware of the distance between that square and the hotel?
I believe it's about 1,800 feet.
When did he hit that shot?
I don't know. I could 6 years ago, but I mean, I haven't even touched a rifle since 2017. I have no idea.
And we heard today about a trigger guard that was attached to a sniper. And we heard about a bullet. Did you post? Yeah, John Christian retrieved both. Thank you so much. Ma'am, are you familiar with that book?
I am. I've seen bullets like this when I was in the military.
From what you saw in the military, is it a common bullet?
Absolutely. This was the most common bullet I saw snipers use.
Ma'am, I want to talk about July. On July, what did you do?
I was in Philadelphia. I was planning to go to the Capello rally. So I got up, took a shower, went to breakfast with some of the other people going to the rally. And then I headed to the square.
Those people at the rally with you, did you know their background?
Well, I knew we were all there to protest the rally. None of us agreed with senators.
Were there any other people in the military now?
Yes, there were.
Yes. At what time did the rally start?
Started around 1 o'clock. That's when I got.
Do you know what time Senator Veglahn was shot?
I do. It's around 1:45.
Your Honor, this should be an important city to the non-graduate. I'm 100% sure. I saw Crosby at the Capello rally July 4th, 2020. And I want to address before Mr. Wilson gets a chance to answer. Did you speak to the FBI about this?
They did. They interviewed me a few days after senators closed.
They asked you about whether or not you think the group will go attack.
They did.
What did you say?
First, I told them that I had never been there. It was the investigation, the assassination of a presidential candidate, and they were talking to me. I was terrified. So I told them I hadn't been there because I thought it would make me feel guilty. But later, just a few minutes later, I told them that I was never there.
And do you know of any way that your cigarette with your DNA could end up on that?
I smoked there on July 3rd, the day before Senator Capello was killed.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions. Yes, sir.
Crosby, maximum questions for you. Now, I'd like to talk about your bit. You served in the U.S. Army for 8 years.
I did.
And you weren't just a soldier.
I was a soldier, but I was a sniper.
Exactly. You were a trained Army.
That's true.
And you were a decade sniper at that.
I was.
Well, you won multiple sniping competitions while serving in the military.
That's true.
You actually hold the U.S. Armed Forces record for the longest distance.
Do I guess no one's been able to break it?
I have to say, 1,540 minutes.
Sounds right.
The shot fired on July 4th was at 604 yards. You have that right?
That's true, about 1,800 feet, like I said.
And while you were in the military, you were actually a consistent shot up to 900.
Sure, back when I was in the military, absolutely.
Now, because you were in the military for so long, you know your way around, don't you? You know your way around a sniper.
Sure.
That's because you used the same exact type of gun throughout your entire 8-year career.
That's true.
And you think you could disassemble that gun in 3 minutes, even to this day.
Right, I used to be able to do it in about 60 seconds. I haven't tried it in a long time, but I'm guessing I can do it in about 3 minutes.
Well, you would recognize parts of that disassembly if I showed you.
I would, yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach the Ms. Crosby, that's a trigger guard.
That's true, it's a part that covers the trigger.
That's the trigger guard to the same exact sniper rifle you used while you were in the.
Sure, this would fit the type of sniper rifle that I used to use. That's true.
And you would also recognize a bullet.
Oh, that's true. I have.
Well, that bullet is the same type of bullet that you used while you were in the army.
Right, like I said, this is the most common type of bullet for sniper rifles.
And just to clarify, can you hold up those two exhibits for me? That bullet can be fired from that gun.
That's true, yes, a sniper rifle, that would fit its trigger guard would be able to fire this.
And those are the weapons and ammunition used for 8 years.
In Afghanistan.
Now, I'd like to talk about where that bullet was fired. You know it's from the top of the Sinessa Hotel.
That's what I heard the detective said, yes.
And you know that on the top of that hotel, they found a cigarette.
Right, the one that I smoked on July 3rd.
They found a cigarette with your DNA on it.
Of course, that's the one who smoked.
They found a cigarette with your fingerprint on it.
They said.
And you admit that you smoked that cigarette from the southwest wall.
Right, the day before, I did.
And you would recognize a photograph of that wall.
Sure. Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach. Well, approaching. Permission to approach the witness. Ms. Crosby, that's the southwest wall of the roof on that hotel.
Right, yeah, that's what the view is.
It's a fair and accurate depiction of that view.
It is.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit 2.
And that's one, so.
No objection, Your Honor.
Now, from this view, you can actually see Rittenhouse Square.
Yeah, you can. I saw it when I was there.
So from this view, you can see the place that Thomas Capello was shot.
That's right.
So if you were up on this roof on July 4th, you would have an unobstructed view of that stage.
I was there on July 3rd. I had an unobstructed view of that stage. That's true.
When you were there, if you were up there on July 4th, you would have an unobstructed view of Thomas Capello.
Sure, I don't see you.
Now, like you mentioned, you originally didn't tell investigators you were up on that roof, did you?
The first time they asked, I said I hadn't been there, but I didn't tell them the next week.
So initially, you lied.
Right, the first time they asked me, I told them I hadn't been. That's true.
Ms. Crosby, that's actually not the first time you lied during an investigation. Well, when you were in the military, you were under investigation for a serious charge.
That's true. I got into a disagreement with someone else as well.
And you assaulted.
Objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we're not using this for any, or excuse me, we're not using this for any sort of error. We're simply establishing the facts of the serious. We're not trying to say that she committed assault on her. And in fact, Your Honor, this is in a pre-admitted exhibit.
Your Honor, it's my knowledge that the 14 is not.
Oh, excuse me, all hearsay there. But we still stand, we're not using this.
Yes, Your Honor, it's also my understanding that it's a way for hearsay, but it has no bars for character evidence objection. And our objection to character evidence is that they're using the fact that she attacked someone in the past to show that it was more likely she attacked somebody in the days of textbook character. They don't need the details of the past. There's a serious charge, and there's dishonesty.
Your Honor, the witness characterized it as a disagreement. It was a serious charge of assault, which the witness then went on to lie, and she did not. By going into assault, we're not trying to establish any character trait, simply the gravity of the charge and how the defense problem. Your Honor,
Your Honor, by saying it's a serious charge, the gravity is made, you don't need the specific violent tendencies, goes to character evidence, a propensity effect, rather than any actual useful effect for the jury.
I'm gonna sustain the objection.
yes, sir. So you have a serious charge brought against you,
That's true. I did.
and you gave a sworn statement.
That's right.
You swore you were telling the truth,
I did.
but you didn't admit that assault.
Objection, Your Honor, character evidence, describes it as assault and altercation.
But you didn't admit to that serious charge.
No, I didn't.
You swore that you didn't do anything wrong.
That's true.
And in that sworn statement, you lied.
They did a discharge. That's true.
I'd like to talk about just one social media. You would recognize the posts if I showed it to you. Your Honor, I'm approaching to retrieve exhibit 12. Here's your photo. That's your tweet.
Yes, I said this.
In this tweet, you say that Thomas Capello is.
Absolutely. That's what I believe.
In this tweet, you say that Thomas Capello is a risk to everyone if he is still alive.
That's what I said.
And on July 4th, the person that you thought was a threat shot him.
It's true. What should happen?
Thank you for your time. Your Honor, I have permission to recall.
Regarding.
I don't know, Your Honor, I asked that.
Any further witnesses for the defense?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests the case in keeping.
With that, government, whenever you're ready to close your arguments, go ahead and close them.
Yes, Your Honor.
Before I proceed, permission to retrieve exhibits 12, 5, 7. Your Honor, Mr. Chandler, members of the jury. In this country, we don't settle disputes with violence. We do it with our voice. Learned on July 4th That didn't happen. You learn the presidential candidate, Thomas Capello, when he was up on stage giving a speech to millions, with the whole world watching. Shot back up. Thanks to that. Question. Members of the jury, you got your answer during this trial. Because the defendant didn't view Mr. Capello as a politician. She viewed him as a fool. She viewed him as an individual who could not be kept alive because he posed a risk to everyone. So what did she do? Well, you heard how she was seen trying to get to the roof just an hour before the shooting. How she had used the same bullet that was used to kill Mr. Capello. How she had used the same gun that was recovered from a nearby restaurant. How she was the one who was connected to this crime. Because while other individuals may have used their voice to show their displeasure, the defendant was the one who used violence. That's why we're here today. Because we as the government have charged the defendant with murder. That means we have to prove to you the elements. There are two of them. The judge will instruct you of them when you go back to deliberate, but all those simply that the defendant killed Mr. Capello, and that she did so deliberately and intentionally. Which the jury, we have to prove those to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Yes, that is the highest burden in our legal system. It means when you walk through those doors, you can't have any other reasonable questions about what happened. But that's not a burden we stray away from as the government. Because the only reasonable explanation in this case comes down to three facts: the threats, the location, and the skills. And you've heard all about this. All about the defendant's words of violence. Members of the jury, the defense has tried to say that everyone felt that there were dozens of other people who had those same sort of dislikes of Mr. Capello, but there was no one else whose DNA was on him. There was no one else who was a trained sniper. Members of the jury, you heard from investigator and special agent DeVico that there were dozens of people she looked into. But there was only one who came back with the forensic evidence linking her to the crime: the defendant. And that brings us to the location. See, members of the jury, it was on the rooftop that the defense does not contest that Mr. Capello was shot, that the bullet and the cigarette butt were found, which linked the defendant to this crime, which showed that she was on that rooftop either the day before or the day after. Now, members of the jury, the defense has tried to come up here and tell you that actually she probably dropped that cigarette butt and someone else came in to shoot the gun. Think about it for a second. Does that make reasonable sense when no one actually saw this other mysterious person trying to get to the roof an hour before the shooting? Or does it make sense that the defendant the day before was scoping out the target, that she was smoking a cigarette, that she left, and then the next day, since she had scoped it out, since she knew the southwest wall had an unobstructed view of that courtyard, she came back. She came back with the same gun she had used in the military, the same ammunition she had used, at a distance half that of what she had taken. She pointed that rifle, full of trigger. Members of the jury, that's the reasonable explanation for what happened. Because the location shows it to me. And because there was no one else skilled in who operated that way. Members of the jury, what happened on July 4th is tragic. A man who was trying to inspire peace became a martyr. But today, you have the opportunity to enact justice and to hold his killer responsible. Find her guilty. Close one of the facts.
Where is the evidence? That's the question I keep asking. When Mr. Wilson says that my client is the only one who could take this shot, the only one who took this shot, where's the evidence? They don't have a sniper rifle. They don't have fingerprints on a sniper rifle. They don't have it on the bullet. They don't have DNA on the bullet. All they have is a cigarette and a part that was in a trash can. That's all they got. Members of the jury, that's not enough. When you're threatening to take away someone's freedom, they're assuming the innocent when they walk through those. That applies to Miss Crosby just as much as anyone. If you're going to throw her in prison, we have to be 100% sure there has to be no reasonable doubts in all we've heard today. A reasonable doubt. And to show you how much they failed to meet the burden, we got to go through the case statements. First, those friends. Now, Mr. Wilson has tried to push that under the rug, but let's be clear. He's told us that Agent of Video reviewed dozens of threats, dozens of people, but members of the jury, it wasn't dozens of threats. It wasn't dozens of people with access. It was countless. No. Everyone in Philadelphia could get on that. People were in the city specifically because they hated this man. And we're supposed to believe that she's the only one that was willing to attack her. That's not it. So we talked about the threats. Look what he talked about the location. Members of the jury, man, he's talking about this cigarette like it's a smoking gun. But members of the jury, they want you to believe that Miss Crosby was smart enough to scope out, shoot a sniper rifle, leave no fingerprints in her hotel on the gun, dispose of it, no bullets, that a team of FBI agents couldn't find anything. But she forgot to pick up her cigarette. Is that real, members of the jury? That she's an assassin that can kill a presidential candidate and can't remember to lean down and pick something? Use your reason. When they don't have a proof, that's reasonable doubt. When you don't have any way to link her, any evidence that she's on the scene of the shot, that's reasonable doubt. When there's a witness that puts her somewhere else when it was being shot, that's reasonable doubt. She has an alibi. There's no evidence that weapons linked her. And there was a countless number of forest of with motive and access, even military power. Members of the jury, all you got to do is use this. When you go back into deliberating, reject unreasonable stories. Reject that an assassin with training would forget a cigarette. Reject that you can link an invisible gun to this problem. Reject that dozens of searches is enough to account for countless threats. If you do that, if you use your reason, you'll see that this case is filled with reasonable doubts, and you'll be forced to come to a verdict after. And
Yes, Your Honor. "100%. Mr. Chan just came before you and asked if you could be 100% certain about what happened. And maybe you can. Maybe you can't be 100% certain that it was actually the defendant on this proof. But luckily, we know someone who was. We know about the hotel employee. Members of the jury, that's exhibit 17. You'll have it when you go back through those. And when you do, I want you to look at line 50. That hotel employee was asked, how sure are you that it was the defendant trying to get up on that roof an hour before the shooting? What did he say? But 100%. You don't have to be sure, because the eyewitness was. Now, they've tried to say that the defendant has an alibi, but members of the jury, you'll also have that when you go back to the living room. You'll be able to see that that alibi witness didn't actually find any photographs of the defendant at the rally. That alibi witness isn't actually sure what time they saw the defendant. That alibi doesn't prove anything. Members of the jury, the person who was 100% certain saw the defendant trying to get up on that roof. And the only person's DNA on that roof was the defendant's. Fine. Guilty.